Kevin Garnett to Boston, Melo to the Knicks, Travis Outlaw to the Clippers, or Giannis to the Heat. These are the most insane trades of every single year since 2000. First up, the Patrick Ewing mega deal. Patrick Ewing is arguably the Knicks' greatest of all time, besides their ultimate icon. But by 2000, at 38, it was Allen Houston's team. Contract issues boiled over, and Ewing asked out. The catch? His contract was so massive that a simple one-for-one trade was totally impossible. But the Seattle Supersonics wanted him bad. To make it work financially, they had to drag in more teams. Knicks, Sonics, Lakers, Suns. 4 teams, 12 players, and 5 draft picks. It remains one of the largest blockbusters in NBA history. Seattle landed Ewing to anchor their paint, hoping to build a real powerhouse alongside Gary Payton and Vin Baker. New York got Glenn Rice, Luke Longley, Vernon Maxwell, 3 other players, and 4 draft picks. The Lakers walked away with Horace Grant, Greg Foster, and Chuck Person. The Suns got Chris Dudley, a first-round pick, and cash. They were basically just there to facilitate the salary matching. But here is the hilarious part. Los Angeles had just won a championship and wanted extra front-court muscle. So they grabbed Horace Grant, a veteran with 3 championship rings. Rings he won with Michael Jordan. The Lakers went 15-1 in the postseason to repeat as champions, somehow winning the Patrick Ewing trade. Believe it. Next up, 2001. In 2001, the Sixers traded for Dikembe Mutombo. This was crazy because Philly was not even desperate. They were the class of the Eastern Conference. Allen Iverson and Larry Brown opened the year winning 10 straight games. By the trade deadline, they were 41-14. But disaster struck when their starting all-star center, Theo Ratliff, fractured his wrist and needed surgery. Now, Philly faced a choice. Do they wait for their injured all-star to heal, or go all in right now on a championship run? They chose to strike immediately. And the target was none other than defensive anchor Dikembe Mutombo, a 3-time defensive star, traded February 22nd, 2001. Philadelphia shipped out Theo Ratliff, Tony Kukoc, Nazr Mohammed, and Pepe Sanchez to land Dikembe Mutombo. Let that sink in. They traded a 27-year-old all-star under contract for a 34-year-old on an expiring deal. It was a massive win-now gamble, and being Dikembe Mutombo, he absolutely dominated. He finished the season capturing his 4th Defensive Player of the Year trophy, a historic NBA first. Allen Iverson won Most Valuable Player, Mutombo won Top Defender, McKee took 6th Man, and Larry Brown won Coach of the Year. They became the first team in history to sweep all 4 major awards. The Mutombo trade was legendary. In 2002, the Pistons and Wizards pulled off a shocking star swap. Right before training camp, coming off a 50-32 season where they won their division. They had just reached the 2nd round and were not rebuilding, yet they suddenly traded their top scorer, Jerry Stackhouse, a 27-year-old, 2-time All-Star who averaged nearly 30 points per game just 2 seasons prior, for Richard Hamilton, a 24-year-old who had never even been an All-Star. He had never played a single postseason game. Other players were involved, but these two were the entire story. Here is how Pistons fans initially reacted to the news. Fox Sports Detroit once opened a broadcast reporting a wild trade, only to reveal it was an April Fool's prank. Surely this was another one of those poorly timed jokes. Yeah, Detroit fans were furious. But guess what? The Pistons won the 2004 championship. Today, if you search for the greatest Pistons ever, Rip Hamilton is ranked 9th. That is how things shook out. In 2003, Seattle pulled off another massive star swap. In February 2003, just hours before the deadline, Seattle traded their franchise icon, Gary Payton. He spent 13 straight seasons there, earning 9 All-Star and 9 All-Defensive selections. But by 2003, he was 34 in 1 year from free agency. Seattle refused to pay him max money at that age. Rather than risk losing him for nothing, they shipped him to Milwaukee in exchange for Ray Allen. Allen was 27, a 3-time All-Star entering his prime. They also snagged 2 players, and a pick that became Luke Ridner. But the tragedy was that Milwaukee got completely burned. Their coach, George Karl, had previously coached Gary Payton in Seattle. Yet Payton still came in and dominated. Milwaukee made the playoffs, but they got bounced in the very first round. Come summer, Gary Payton just walks away in free agency. He signs with the Lakers. So Milwaukee gets exactly 34 games out of Gary Payton, while Ray Allen becomes a 4-time All-Star in Seattle. Don Contest legend, Ray Allen. 2004 Lakers trade Shaq. The Lakers three-peated with maybe the greatest duo ever, Shaq and Kobe. But by 2004, things turned completely toxic. Shaq demands the ball down low, Kobe wants to run the show, and they just cannot share the floor, plus Shaq wants a massive max extension. Shaq is 32, the Lakers have to pick a side, Kobe or Shaq. They choose Kobe. That prompts a trade demand from Shaq. Here is the crazy part, the Lakers actually asked for Dwyane Wade in return. Miami tells them to get the hell out of here. Instead, Los Angeles settles for Lamar Odom and Karen Butler. Shaq heads to South Beach and immediately dominates. He finishes second in MVP voting and wins a ring the very next year. Meanwhile, the Lakers completely fall apart. 34 wins. They miss the postseason entirely. It is their first time sitting out in over a decade, and it takes 5 years to win another title. In the long run, both sides got what they wanted. Right then, it felt like robbery. 2005 Hornets trade Baron Davis. Baron Davis is only 25, a 2-time All-Star who just led the league in steals, and New Orleans basically gives him away for nothing. Just Speedy Claxton and Dale Davis. No draft picks, no prospects, nothing. To say the Hornets were brutal is an understatement. They sat at 2-29 at one point. Plus, Baron Davis is constantly battling injuries. Honestly, through year one, this trade did not look like much of anything. Until year two. The Warriors end a 13-year playoff drought and immediately upset the 67-win Dallas Mavericks. They become the first 8th seed to beat a 1 seed in 7 games, with Davis dropping 25 a night. He instantly becomes the iconic face of that legendary We Believe squad, while New Orleans gets 0 long-term return. Easily one of the most forgotten trades on the list. Yet it completely revived a classic franchise. 2006. The Sixers trade AI. Allen Iverson was the undisputed face of Philly for over a decade. We are talking an MVP, 4 scoring titles, and a finals run, plus he is still putting up over 30 points a night. But by 2006, the Sixers are a total mess and falling apart. So Iverson demands a trade, and almost every team in the league calls, including Minnesota. The only article I found on that rumor was in Spanish. That is how real it got. Then, out of nowhere, Denver swings a deal. The timing is absolutely wild. 3 days prior, Carmelo Anthony got suspended 15 games for that MSG brawl. Melo popped Nate Robinson. Suddenly, Denver loses its superstar and immediately trades for the guy ranked right below him in the scoring race. Iverson and Melo were literally number 1 and 2 in the league in scoring. The trade sends Iverson to Denver, while Philly gets back Andre Miller, Joe Smith, and 2 first-round picks. That move basically kicks off the Andre Iguodala era in Philly. Sadly, Melo and AI would never win a ring together. But they were certainly an electric duo for a brief moment. 2007 Celtics get Kevin Garnett. Boston had just finished 24-58, posting the second worst record in the East and suffering their worst ever losing streak. Then the draft lottery rolls around, and things absolutely do not go their way. They drop to 5, missing out on Greg Oden and Kevin Durant. It looks like a total disaster. Honestly, though, it was the best thing that ever happened to them. Because first, they trade for Ray Allen. They ship out the 5th pick, Delonte West, and Wally Szczerbiak. And that is exactly what finally convinces KG to reconsider joining Boston. Before that, Kevin Garnett straight up refused to join a rebuilding franchise with only Paul Pierce on the roster. With 2 established stars already on the roster, Boston went completely all in just a month later. They packaged Al Jefferson, Ryan Gomes, Gerald Green, Sebastian Telfair, Theo Ratliff, and 2 first-round picks. All of that for just one guy. Kevin Garnett. 12 years in Minnesota, an MVP trophy, and 10 All-Star appearances. He led the league in rebounding 4 straight years. Easily the greatest Timberwolf ever. And the fit was instant. Boston leaped from 24 wins to 66, pulling off the largest single-season turnaround in NBA history. Garnett won Defensive Player of the Year, and they got their championship immediately. Meanwhile, Minnesota became the league laughingstock for a decade until Cat and Anthony Edwards saved them. That was the 2007 blockbuster. In 2008, it was the Gasol trade. Kobe had just demanded a trade publicly on Stephen A. Smith's show, saying the Lakers had to move him. Honestly, it made sense. The Lakers roster was absolute garbage back then. Kobe practically had you and me starting next to him. So, what did front office do? Less than 3 weeks later, they landed 27-year-old All-Star Pau Gasol. And they gave up almost nothing of real value. They sent out Kwame Brown's expiring contract, a bench warmer rookie, and a guy who is literally retired and coaching high school basketball. Add in 2 late first-rounders, plus the draft rights to a completely unknown second-round prospect named Marc Gasol, which is exactly why they call it the Gasol trade. A crazy brother swap. But the Lakers kept Kobe, Lamar Odom, and Andrew Bynum, simply dropping an all-star into the mix. They went 22-5 down the stretch, securing the top seed out west. Kobe locked up his only MVP. LA swept Denver, handled Utah, and knocked off the defending champion Spurs to reach the finals. And Pau Gasol, the guy who was 0-12 in his playoff career with Memphis, suddenly won 12 postseason games in his very first run as a Laker. Though, even after losing to Boston that year, they secured the next 2 championships. It paid off. Turns out, trading for a franchise's crown jewel usually works. In 2009, the Magic grabbed Vince Carter right after a 59-win finals run. Dwight Howard was only 23, fresh off a Defensive Player of the Year award, having just dethroned the champion Celtics. They even knocked out LeBron's 66-win Cavaliers. They were right there. But instead of running it back, Orlando decided to shake things up. First, they let Hedo Turkoglu walk in free agency. He was the guy who actually ran their late-game offense. Next, they made a massive move. They packaged Courtney Lee, Rafer Alston, and Tony Batty, sending them out for 8-time All-Star Vince Carter and a 21-year-old Ryan Anderson, who was barely a blip on the radar. This was a huge homecoming. Carter grew up an hour outside Orlando, so he was finally coming back. But he was 32, and New Jersey was clearing house ahead of the legendary 2010 free agency class. So, the Magic pounced, putting together a highly impressive regular season run with Carter on board. They hit 59 wins again, matching their finals-bound record, before sweeping Charlotte and completely dismantling Atlanta in round 2. That put them at 8-0 to start the postseason. Then, they ran into Boston. The Celtics jumped out to a 3-0 lead. Orlando clawed back for 2 wins, but Boston closed it in 6 as Carter completely vanished. He shot a miserable 21% from deep, and just 18 months later, Orlando traded him away. That ended the brief Vince Carter era in Orlando. Enter 2010. The Heat assembled their famous Big Three. Most fans assume this was pure free agency, but it actually required a trade, so we have to cover it. We are talking LeBron James, Chris Bosh, and Dwyane Wade. They were all hitting free agency that summer, and Miami had spent years clearing out cap space to land them. Unbelievably, all 3 went top 5 in the 2003 draft. Plus, they had built chemistry playing together on Team USA. The trio essentially orchestrated this master plan beforehand. Wade stayed home, Bosh signed on, and then came the decision. LeBron announced on live television that he was taking his talents to South Beach, leaving Cleveland absolutely furious. Cavs owner Dan Gilbert even published a famously unhinged letter venting his rage. Yet, despite all the bad blood, Cleveland still agrees to a sign and trade, grabbing draft picks and trade exceptions instead of letting him walk for nothing. Toronto makes a similar move with Chris Bosh, and Miami literally has to gut their entire roster just to make the money work. The whole thing turns into a massive 3-team trade, and obviously, Miami's new Big Three reaches 4 straight finals, bringing home 2 championship rings. Most fans forget this was actually a trade. In reality, it is one of the biggest blockbusters in league history. Even in the NBA offseason, the board is still loaded over at Prize Picks. They have the WNBA, Major League Baseball, UFC, and tons of other action running daily. So there is always a game to watch and a new lineup to lock in. My favorite pick is A'ja Wilson to win WNBA Defensive Player of the Year. She already has 3 of those trophies, and with the way she anchors that defense, I love her odds of winning another. Best part is, Prize Picks is incredibly simple to navigate. Go with more or less on player stats or try out their new team picks. You just choose the winner, the spread, or the game total for any matchup. Set your lineup, lock it in, and you are ready. Make sure you follow my profile at 23 Picks so you can tail my plays with just a single tap. New players can submit a first $5 lineup, and if you win, you get $150 in bonus play. Just use code HMA. Thanks to Prize Picks for supporting the channel. Now, let us get right back to the stories. In 2011, we got the Chris Paul saga. This was actually 2 wild trades in 6 days. And the league straight up vetoes the first one. Paul is 26, absolute peak of his powers, and the Lakers, Hornets, and Rockets shake hands on a blockbuster. Paul to the Lakers, Gasol to Houston, while Lamar Odom, Kevin Martin, Luis Scola, and a draft pick head to New Orleans, until David Stern says absolutely not, killing the deal. The league claims it is not in the Hornets' best interest. Laker fans are furious, and the swap is dead. Just 6 days later, CP3 gets moved anyway. But to the Clippers instead, they surrender Eric Gordon, Chris Kaman, Al-Farouq Aminu, and Minnesota's unprotected first-round pick. In return, they land Chris Paul, and Lob City is officially born. CP3, DeAndre Jordan, Blake Griffin, the most electric trio ever. Just like that, CP3 is traded to Los Angeles twice in 6 days. Different teams. In 2012, Oklahoma City trades James Harden right after a finals run with Durant and Westbrook. This was easily one of the greatest young cores ever, yet 4 months later, Harden is gone. Why? Because they could not agree on a contract extension. OKC offered 4 years, $60 million. Harden demanded the absolute max. So they ship him to Houston for Kevin Martin, Jeremy Lamb, and a package of draft picks. Honestly, at the time, it did not seem like a total disaster. Harden was not an all-star yet, never even started full-time, and was just a stellar sixth man. But Daryl Morey saw superstar potential. Then the guy goes out, averages 36 points, and becomes an all-time elite scorer. He wins an MVP. Meanwhile, Jeremy Lamb hit that one wild buzzer beater for Charlotte, so respect to him. But yeah, terrible move by OKC. Now, 2013, but if you want to talk about real disasters, look no further than the Celtics and Nets blockbuster in 2013. Spoiler alert, it was not Boston. Brooklyn already had Deron Williams, Joe Johnson, and Brook Lopez. So what do they need? A small forward and a power forward. Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett fit perfectly, so the Nets traded their entire future. Look at this haul. But that is not even the worst of it. 2 of those picks turned into Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown. So the Nets basically traded Tatum and Brown for a single second-round exit and about 1 year of an aging Pierce and Garnett. If you search for the worst trades in NBA history, this absolute robbery is sitting right at the top every single time. Sorry, Nets fans. In 2014, Cleveland trades for Kevin Love. The second LeBron announces he's coming back to Cleveland, the entire blueprint changes. Suddenly, the Cavs are going all in for a championship. Weeks later, the Cavs trade for star forward Kevin Love. Love was absolute money, coming off averaging 26 and 12. Call it a massive stroke of luck, the Cavs had just secured the #1 overall draft pick. They used it on Andrew Wiggins, giving them the ultimate trade chip to acquire an elite superstar to pair with LeBron James. Just like that, the new Big Three was born: LeBron, Kyrie, and Kevin Love. Naturally, that squad went on to win the 2016 championship. That was 2014. Moving into 2015, there was no single blockbuster transaction that broke the internet, but we did get a chaotic 4-team trade. Instead, one complex deal went down where some incredibly talented players were shipped off all over the league. The Phoenix Suns had a ridiculously crowded backcourt featuring Goran Dragic, Isaiah Thomas, and Eric Bledsoe. With everyone fighting for minutes, the Suns front office decided to blow the entire roster up like the Joker. The guy they targeted, though, was Brandon Knight, another high-usage point guard. It made zero sense, but the Suns pulled off 2 separate deals that morphed into a massive 4-team trade. Here is the breakdown. Phoenix got Brandon Knight, who was playing like a legit borderline all-star that season. Milwaukee received Michael Carter-Williams, the reigning Rookie of the Year. Philadelphia secured a first-round pick and center JaVale McGee. Here is the sneaky part: the Boston Celtics snagged Isaiah Thomas. So, in trying to clear out their point guard logjam, Phoenix traded away the one guy who would finish top 5 in MVP voting just a few years later. Yet, the big headlines that day were all about Knight and Carter-Williams. Talk about a typical Phoenix Suns blunder. Fast forward to 2016, and the Serge Ibaka disaster class. This is not just about a terrible trade, even though it was an absolute train wreck. Instead, look at what Oklahoma City pulled off right after. Ibaka was 26 years old and one of the premier two-way big men in basketball when OKC shipped him to Orlando. They got back Victor Oladipo, Ersan Ilyasova, and the draft rights to Domantas Sabonis. Orlando had literally drafted Sabonis minutes before the trade. On paper, it actually looked like a decent swap for both sides. But then, Thunder GM Sam Presti went to work. He immediately flipped Ilyasova, who barely even played for OKC, into Jerami Grant. Oladipo and Sabonis stayed for just one season. After that, Presti traded both of them straight up for Paul George. 2 years later, he flipped George again, shipping him to the Clippers for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, plus 5 first-round picks. The initial deal of Ibaka for Oladipo and Sabonis, who both became All-NBA stars, was already a massive win for OKC. But turning those assets into Shai Gilgeous-Alexander? That is an absolute masterclass by Presti. In 2017, we got a superstar point guard swap. Kyrie Irving won Cleveland a ring, then demanded a trade. He simply wanted to be the main guy on his own team. Eager to land Kyrie, the Celtics packaged Isaiah Thomas, who had just put together the absolute best season of his life. He averaged 29 points a game, finished 5th in MVP voting, and carried Boston to the #1 seed in the Eastern Conference. Boston looked at a 5'9" guard with a bad hip and backed away. They cold-bloodedly snaked him. Just like that, Kyrie was headed to Boston. Kyrie had a stellar regular season, averaging 24 and 5 before a devastating knee injury sidelined him right before the playoffs. Over in Cleveland, things fell apart for Isaiah Thomas. He missed half the year recovering from that brutal hip injury. He managed to suit up for only 15 games before the Cavs shipped him off to the Lakers just months later. Sadly, he was never the same dynamic player again. It remains one of the wildest trades ever, the top 2 teams in the East swapping franchise point guards. In the end, neither superstar found happiness in their new home. That brings us to 2018 and the ultimate superstar rental. Kawhi Leonard in San Antonio completely fractured over his injury rehab. He played only 9 games, while the Spurs desperately wanted him on the court. He wants to play 2K. This guy doesn't want to hoop, and his real target was Los Angeles, his actual home. Then Toronto crashes the party. The Raptors knew he was a 1-year rental heading into free agency, but they didn't care. They ship out DeMar DeRozan. He was the literal face of the franchise, their all-time leader in points, games, and minutes. Jakob Poeltl and a protected pick went with him. In return, they get Kawhi Leonard and Danny Green. Talk about a massive gamble. Everyone knew the risk, but Toronto rolled the dice anyway. Then Kawhi comes in and absolutely dominates. He drops 26.6 points per game, and then comes the postseason. Kawhi averages over 30, hitting that legendary Game 7 buzzer beater over Philly. Taking down Golden State, they secured Toronto their first ever NBA championship, and then he just leaves, only to return 8 years later in 2026. Talk about wild. That was 2018. In 2019, AD wanted out of New Orleans, targeting LA. The guy literally wore a shirt reading, "That is all, folks," making it clear he wanted the Lakers. After months of exhausting negotiations, the blockbuster deal gets done. AD is heading to LA. The Pelicans haul in Brandon Ingram, Lonzo Ball, Josh Hart, the #4 pick, and a mountain of draft capital. Post-trade, the Lakers absolutely dominate. They go 52-19 to grab the top seed, then win the title that same year. Meanwhile, in New Orleans, Ingram becomes an all-star, winning Most Improved Player, while Lonzo locks in as a reliable starter. They flip DeAndre Hunter for even more draft assets, setting up their future around Zion Williamson. Truly a historic, massive deal. 2020 brings the Drew Holiday 4-team mega deal, right after Milwaukee suffered a devastating, embarrassing exit in the playoffs. They had the absolute best record in basketball. Giannis took home MVP and Defensive Player of the Year, yet they got bounced by Miami in round 2. The Bucks had to go all in to prove they were serious. So what was their move? They get the Pelicans, Nuggets, and Thunder on the line for a massive multiplayer blockbuster. Milwaukee lands defensive anchor Drew Holiday. The price is Eric Bledsoe, George Hill, and 4 draft picks. The Pelicans walk away loaded. They grab Steven Adams, whom they never really utilized, alongside Eric Bledsoe, and a massive chest of draft capital. OKC just sits back collecting assets, and Denver barely registers. Less than a month later, Giannis locks in the Supermax, the largest deal in league history back then. He admitted the trade was what convinced him to stay. And the very next year, Milwaukee wins the title. That iconic Drew to Giannis alley-oop became one of the most legendary plays in sports history. 2021 brought the James Harden sweepstakes after Houston completely imploded. Their head coach walked, and their general manager resigned. Russell Westbrook demanded a trade and got out. Harden watched the chaos and decided this situation couldn't be saved. Within 24 hours, he was out the door as well. Brooklyn already boasted a premier duo with KD and Kyrie Irving plus Landry Shamet, I suppose. But they believed Harden was their missing piece, mortgaging their future by shipping out 7 total draft picks for him. Houston walks away with endless picks. In a wild twist, Jarrett Allen somehow gets routed to the Cleveland Cavaliers. A genius move for Cleveland, honestly. But as for KD, Kyrie, and Harden, it was a colossal, failed super team. They played exactly 8 regular season games together while healthy. Within 12 months, the entire experiment collapsed, and Harden was shipped off the next year for Ben Simmons. Jarrett Allen became an all-star in Cleveland, leaving the Nets with a total disaster. 2022 brought Donovan Mitchell to a highly unexpected destination. Literally everyone from the media to Mitchell himself was convinced. Even the Cavs' general manager assumed the star guard was headed straight to the Knicks. But after weeks of rumors, New York balked at paying Utah's massive asking price. That is when Cleveland swooped in out of nowhere, trading Colin Sexton, Lauri Markkanen, Ochai Agbaji, and 5 picks. And Cleveland somehow keeps their entire young core intact while adding Donovan Mitchell on top of it. So they suddenly had Mitchell, Garland, Mobley, and Allen. What made this wild was that everyone thought Mitchell was heading to New York, only for Cleveland to swoop in and grab him out of nowhere. Totally unexpected, but a massive blockbuster. 2023, the KD Suns trade. Just a few months before this went down, KD publicly committed to staying with the Brooklyn Nets. Then Brooklyn ships Kyrie Irving to Dallas, and 4 days later, KD demands out. Phoenix goes all in. They immediately ship out Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, and 4 first-rounders, all for KD. It was actually a 4-team deal, but the rest is irrelevant. And honestly, Brooklyn walked away with a pretty solid haul. Bridges immediately exploded, averaging over 26 points a night. Later, they flipped him for 5 more first-round picks. Now Brooklyn practically owns every single pick from 1 to 30 in the 2034 draft. 2024. The Knicks-Wolves swap. Now this next move caught everyone completely off guard, dropping literally days before training camp started. Nobody expected Minnesota to trade Karl-Anthony Towns, their franchise cornerstone, for 9 seasons. But the new CBA changed the game. Towns was set to make $220 million on his Supermax. Minnesota didn't want to trigger that dreaded second apron. So they pulled the trigger. New York lands Towns and the rights to James Nnaji, who, by the way, is still a college hoops player. In return, Minnesota got Julius Randle, Dante DiVincenzo, and a protected first-round pick, and honestly, DiVincenzo was the crucial piece here. He literally just set the Knicks' single-season franchise record for three-pointers made. New York desperately wanted to keep him with the Nova Knicks crew, but Minnesota refused to deal without Dante. But in the end, the Knicks won the championship this year. 2025, the massive 7-team trade, the largest single transaction in NBA history. It involved nearly a quarter of the league. Crucially, the Suns ended the Beal, Booker, and KD Big Three experiment. Houston wanted KD badly. They shipped out Jaylen Green, Dillon Brooks, and the 10th overall draft pick, along with a load of second-rounders to land Kevin Durant and Clint Capella. But wilder still, this deal just kept ballooning. Between draft night deals and sign-in trades, it snowballed into a historic 7-team mega trade. The first one in league history. Just look at this. I do not even know what to say. Like, what the hell were the Nets doing here? Future second-round assets? Or Rokas Jokubaitis? Who? Honestly, the trade should have ended right there. But because it expanded into a 7-team monster, it easily took the crown for craziest trade of the year. 2026, the Giannis saga finally ends. The Jaylen Brown deal made a strong case for the top spot, but whenever Giannis is on the move, you absolutely have to pick that one. Giannis spent 13 seasons in Milwaukee, winning 2 MVPs, a Defensive Player of the Year award, a ring, and becoming the greatest Buck ever. But after what felt like 94 years of rumors, they finally did. The return? Giannis and Bobby Portis were traded for Tyler Herro, Jaime Jaquez, Khalil Ware, Nate Ament, and a massive pile of picks. This pairs Giannis with Bam Adebayo, creating one of the most dominant defensive front courts in the entire league. We still do not know how this experiment will play out, but it is easily my pick for the absolute wildest trade of the year so far. If you enjoyed this breakdown, I would really appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. Honestly, it is the best way to let me know that you want to see more of these videos. Thanks so much for watching.